Thank you. It's an honor to be in front of you, and it's an honor to come back and be considered an expert in technology and tools and civic engagement. I'm just going to be off the cuff, and thank goodness there's someone who's going to be taking transcription. I'm really have to commend everyone who has presented beforehand. The issues that they brought up that I've seen are building trust in government. Particularly this last panel ended with the idea of some type of civic core. And then also speaking about how do you get people aware of public information, and ultimately how do people feel that they have a voice and traction within government proceedings. And so how do they find a particular problem, and then how do they address it? And in my first testimony in front of this panel, I focused on that there are three particular issues. The first one is that government should be digital because it provides the greatest amount of flexibility and accessibility across languages and platforms and devices. Digital and data literacy are core elements of a 21st century democracy. And then ultimately, we need civic participation beyond the ballot box. There have been a number of charter revision commissions that have attempted to address these things. The first one is COPIC. So there's actually a provision right now that sits under the Public Advocate's Office that allows for this Commission on Public Information and Communication. And in 1989, this was a very virtuous commission, but sadly, near 30 years after its creation, resources have been scarce. This particular commission has hardly even met its charter mandated requirements once per year. It's no longer even advocated on the Public Advocate's website, and technology has kind of outstripped many of the components within COPIC. The city's open data law is an excellent example of that. COPIC was designed to essentially document all of the city's open data, and now we actually have legislation that sits around that. And so there are a few core elements within what I would like to see as recommendations for moving forward. The first is that there's this thing called civic service design or service design, which speaks to many of the issues that previous panelists were talking about. And I have a pamphlet here, which is actually from NYC Opportunity on tools and tactics. And it's essentially how do we build government services with people, not for people. This is the very first mayoral office that's dedicated to thinking about how services are designed in a co-design process. This is policy, websites, tools, documents, all of these things are co-designed through a practice. We're pioneering it here in New York City, and this is one of those particular tools that I think is fundamental that should be part of the Office of Civic Engagement. The second thing is that content on municipal websites is absolutely at its core. It is how we find out what is going on within our municipal government. And we continue to underfund and under-resource that at the community board level. We are at a point where community board websites are using content management systems that are 20 years old, that are very clunky. My organization, BetaNYC, is trying to get the city to adopt more open source tools that are secure and flexible, so that way we can have technology, 21st century technology, in the 21st century, and we're not using 20th century technology in the 21st century. Second to that, there is an excellent department inside of New York City Planning. It's called NYC Planning Labs, and with a core team of 4 people, they've been able to redesign 8 urban planning tools using open source practices. This is a way how agencies can be working efficiently, securely, and in the open. Lastly, we fundamentally believe that New Yorkers need a central touch point of how they can engage within their municipal government. And while NYC 311 has a great service, NYC Service does a great service, we want to figure out how do we petition government in a 21st century manner that essentially points out that there is a bug within our operating system and that we want the operating system improved. And to that point, several years ago, we wrote for and called for a We the People of New York City, which is essentially a petitioning tool that would allow New Yorkers to identify a particular problem that's in the city and work with their neighbors to get that articulated and kind of figure out what is the traction, what's the process to identify these problems, work with their neighbors to express that this problem exists, and then figure out resources within that. Participatory budgeting has done a great job of building out that as a scaffolding and as a framework to address those particular issues. But participatory budgeting really only focuses on capital projects, not necessarily discretionary projects.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So what we're looking for, at least within the Office of Civic Engagement, we feel that the Office of Civic Engagement actually can be a digital steward that focuses on this amazing thing that exists in Taiwan, where they have participation officers, and these individuals help foster online, offline best practices to essentially identify these very particular sour points or bugs within our ecosystem or our software system. We want to see participatory budgeting grow to be actually 1% of the discretionary and capital budget, so that way our people are actually determining what are the problems that need to be fixed. There's actually money behind that. And ultimately, we want to see a civic service studio and technology lab that's based right now in NYC Opportunity grow their practice, so that way they can help all government agencies and nonprofit services that are providing essential services to New Yorkers, as well as community groups, figure out how to address all of the issues that are cross-generational, cross communities that to ensure that there is systems and policy and design and technology that all work in conjunction with each other. Thank you. So my organization works with the Manhattan Borough President's Office to get community boards digitally literate. And as you have probably engaged with community boards, they span the gamut of literacy. My mom's in her 70s is a very savvy Facebook user, but trying to get her to use some of the dashboards that we're creating may be a little bit of a stretch. So how do we go about it? I mean, it's the same way that you go about building any other type of literacy. It is a concentrated effort. You have to be able to link the tool that you're using, right, pen and paper, with the process or the purpose of what is it good for, taking notes. Well, these dashboards that we're creating visualizes 311 data and then links that to a decision-making process within the community board. So you always have to contextualize information, contextualize the tool and the purpose and the result that you're looking for. It's not easy because, you know, these tools advance. They sometimes are done in ways that are complicated, or they were designed years ago and then forgotten and never to be updated again. Our city's rules website happens to be one of those things where you can actually comment on the city's rules, but you can't actually access that rules website through your mobile phone. You can't access it decently on a tablet. You can really only access it on one of these big machines. The same thing goes for community board websites. Majority of them are accessible only on desktops. They're not accessible on your mobile phones. They're not accessible on tablets. So the idea is, how do we get technology working for everyone, is by bringing them into the room, engaging with them on the platforms that they have either in their pockets or in their bags, understanding that those interfaces need to be rewritten for the users that are out there, and having direct dialogue with them. That is what civic service design is about. That's what human-centered design is about. That's what the work that we're trying to do at BetaNYC is about. That's what we want to see embedded in government. Human-centered government. Right now, we have this process where essentially we're electing officials to represent us, but yet when issues come up that we want to be represented, it is hard pressed to find them to represent us. That's what the last two panelists were talking about. And in this particular process, I'd like to point out what Taiwan does. And Taiwan has a multi-platform petitioning process. It is paper and it is digital. And you have the ability to bring up issues. If you write in a paper petition, that would be digitized and put online so that everybody else can see it. Everybody who's on the website can see these petitions. Once it crosses a certain threshold, there is a government body, hopefully the Office of Civic Engagement in the future here in New York City, that would be chartered to either figure out, is it a participatory budgeting issue? Is it a financial issue, like doors on bathrooms in the elementary school that I live across the street from? Or is it a systematic policy issue, like how Uber waiver should exist within New York City, or how for-hire vehicles should be regulated in the future. If it is part of this regulatory process, the V-Taiwan process identifies the stakeholders, public, academic, and government, brings them into the room, and then goes through a multi-iterative process to identify what are those issues. So to answer your question, how do you get people using modern technology? Well, you have to use the human-centered design approach. You actually have to bring those people into the room. And thank goodness we have entities in New York City like NYC Opportunity, like NYC Planning Labs, that understand that they're building technology with their users and not for their users. Can I just add real quickly to Commissioner Siegel? The point of the V-Taiwan process is once you have identified a problem, you actually use this multi-stakeholder engagement that includes government, academics, private sector, as well as nonprofit organizations. And so one of our recommendations is that this Office of Civic Engagement have these participation officers that are able to bring in this diversity, these 4 particular channels, to address those particular problems. I will say that we have actually a civic technology and open data curriculum that we partnered with CUNY undergraduates that we now give to community board members, and we're looking to do that with high school and middle school students. And so the idea is partnering government information and problems that community members express, and pointing out that students have an opportunity to use that information as power to then lobby government to address those particular issues. And I hope that this type of curriculum would be embodied within the Office of Civic Engagement.